Hello, I'm Andy King, technical editor of Good Woodworking magazine, and today we're going to do a little bit of work on basic workshop rotation with your machinery. Okay, so now we're at the stage of actually doing some setting out onto a rod. Now, there are different people who do it different ways to me. As usual, I'm different. Some would actually keep this and mark up all their joints and stuff first, take all the joints out, then do the machining after. I was taught this way and the other way. This is the way I prefer. I'll explain why now. Basically, with the rod, what you're looking to do is get all your marking out onto a board, use that as your reference point. You never use a tape measure again after that point. And all you really need in this simple exercise, this one, just two measurements really. So all I'm looking to do now is I'll strike a line as a first reference, which is there. And then from this point, I know I need to be 700 overall height, 500 overall width. So from that point there, I'll measure off 700. Now I could mark the end there. Now I don't like doing that because you never know how inaccurate these are. So I'll just take it up to 800 and mark on the 100 point there. So I know that's going to be 700 and I know I'm going to be accurate. So that's my height rod. And I also need one at 500 for my width rod, so I'll do the same again above it. So again I'll go to 600 and come back 100 just to take out any discrepancies with the end of the tape. So that's my width. So that's that now. Really speaking, the tape measure shouldn't be needed anymore. So from that point, I'll now strike a datum line along the bottom. So along here. Okay, so now on here I'm now going to mark out what would be sections through. If you imagine your door and frame here, it would be a section cut down through the middle that way and that way, so you can see all the components basically on end. So you'll be seeing through this section here with the door in section there, so you'll see them all in line and you can work out what's what from there. So with that in mind, taking one of your components, which is why I do it this way, I know full well that the door frame is going to sit on end like that, so that's going to be my width there, my overall width, which is there. I can put that on. And from that point, I'll just strike a line. And the most important thing here is a sharp pencil, because you don't want thick pencil lines if you're marking shoulder lines off of a rod. So keep your pencil very, very sharp and do it often as needed. So I'll just do that again. So from that point there, okay, so that is basically the width of the frame. I'll do the same down this end. And all you're doing is your overall sizes, you're working back in with each component. So your overall size remains the same, you work back in and you can work in any tolerances you need at the same time. So when I've got this one in, that's there, that's the overall frame thickness again. And I would put one on the end like that, on its flat there. That's the overall frame width, or thickness of the timber. So we strike that through. So what we've done now is we've worked in just the basic door jamb dimensions, which is still in the square stock, transferred it up here as well. So I've now got width and height all together. So basically what we've got is essentially the positions of the door jambs and the door heads. So it's there and there and there and there. But now we need to draw in rebates, and also we can start dropping in the door dimensions as well now. So this is the reason I like to do this, is because it's all very well saying I'm going to be making a rebate. It's going to be, for argument's sake, 25mm by 13mm. Invariably, when you actually come to cutting that rebate, you may be slightly out. It could be just marginal, but it's enough that when you actually, if you set out religiously off of those dimensions you said you were going to do, When you put it on the rod and you mark from the rod, if they are very, very slightly out on your actual machining marks, then when you actually put it together, what you'll end up with is steps in your shoulder lines, or you may find that you've got a little bit more work to put it together, and you may start creeping in a little bit smaller than you want it to be. So ideally, this is the reason I do this. I always do my marking out directly from the timber once I've machined it. Now, it does make life a little bit more tricky now, because obviously I've removed this out of my rebate. It's now come out of what is my facing edge. So my reference face is now altered to what it should be. I should be marking off of there and there. That's going to make life a little bit tricky, which is why some people say you shouldn't do it. But because I've marked from that reference face and I've come parallel off of something that's pushing it, as with the spindle moulder, it's pushed it up against the fence, I'm basically saying that what that reference face is there is what that reference face is there, and likewise there is now there. I've just moved it in or out accordingly, depending on where I am. So I can, in theory, reference off of that face equally as well as I can off of that face originally. I don't really want to start referencing off the back edges, because that starts bringing in any discrepancies into your timber which you had before, should there be any. So it's sort of right, it's sort of wrong, it's for your own decision really, but I find it for this reason. So what I can now do is drop that onto there, again, onto my overall size dimension line, which I've already pre-marked. Just make a faint mark in there. That now becomes my rebate. I know that's going to be right. So I can now transfer those lines through. Again, just lightly score them in first and foremost so you know where you're looking. Do the same thing on these dimensions here. You've got the same there. Again, just a faint line just to define it. And the same there. And again, just lightly bring them in. So what I've now established really by doing that is the overall size of my doorway, or the actual door itself. Now, this is where a rod will work wonders for anybody, because what you're trying to achieve at any level is something that's going to fit as easy as possible. So you make your frame, you don't want to be fitting doors to frames, you want to be making a door that's going to fit straight in that frame. So in this situation, I now know that if I put this on there, at that point there, which is my overall size of my door, and the same way on this size, again, that would be coming onto that rebate size there. When my door is actually made up as a unit, it will be an actual fit that is basically going to be as tight as the rebate, which I don't really want. I want to make it so that I can just basically hang it, fit it, job done. No need to plane anything off, maybe just a leading edge to stop it clipping as it comes in. So with that in mind, I can actually now start pulling in tolerances if I want to. So I can actually leave what will be a hinge line and a closing line. So I can actually pull in about 1 millimetre here or there, and then make the door size to that. I'll do that in a minute. Just let me finish this marking outside of it first, just to show the principle of. So again, I've established this position here. I now need to establish this one here. So again, you do the same thing. So you can actually just drop it on, and just inside, just make a little mark. And again, on this one, you do the same again, and you make a little mark. And you pull these through. And what you can do, if you do a lot of marking out, and it's something I often do, you find in situations like that where you've got quite a deep rebate, it's very tricky to get the pencil in sometimes to get that position right. So because you've made this over long and you're going to cut some off because of the snipe, or if there is any snipe, that is, that's why you shouldn't mark from this end. You shouldn't just think, I'll just put that on there and draw around it, because what you're doing is, if there is any snipe, you're pulling in the actual line of the reduced piece of timber. You need to be up around here somewhere. So if you allow yourself enough that you can just chop a piece off the end, use that as your gauge, then you can actually just use a tiny little gauge block, drop that on where you need it, do one either end, still leave yourself enough timber to work with what you need to. You've got nice little gauge blocks then to suit, and you just draw around them as you need to, just pull in your little rebates, rather than have to do it like that. Because you now know that that section up this part here is absolutely smack on, you can actually drop that on and then just do your little ticks. Don't draw around it like you would normally, just do slight little reference lines and square them in. It's always more accurate to do it in with a square. So that's another little tip, you can do it that way if you like. So anyway, so what we've established now is the overall frame size here. So we can, if you like, you can define that a little bit more, but I don't like to draw them in too deep because you can start to bring in thicker lines than you really want. But it's just enough in this situation that you can actually see them on the camera a little bit better, really. So we defined our rebate line. So as I say now, we're going to make the door positions now. So again, I want to be leaving myself a slight gap. So I'm going to allow about 1 millimetre either side, 1.5 millimeters at the most. And again, you can work this in for whether it's going to be whatever you're making. If it's furniture, you want obviously a tighter fit. If it's external joinery, you need a little bit more to allow for paints in all these different finishes you need to get on it. So you can alter all this accordingly. That's the beauty of a rod. You can actually set it up to do what you want it to do. And then you've got less work when you actually come to actually being out and about doing what you want to do with it. So again, a piece of door stock, drop it in position, and that's where it's going to fit on there because I've already predetermined that with a rebate. So now that's my overall size of door there and there. Height and width, both are defined by marking the rebate lines off of your jam size. So again, as I say, I want to be allowing myself a little margin inside of about 1 millimeter. That's all it's going to be. So I'm just going to just lightly put those in. Strike those in as well. And again, if you're doing stuff with mouldings on, you've got, you know, OGs, overloads, anything you like, these can actually be drawn in. Again, as I said earlier, if you can just chop a piece of stock off and use that as a little pattern for the actual mould itself, then that is always good because you can actually draw around the mould itself. I wouldn't, as I said, I wouldn't draw around the whole section, just the mould. That will define the section you need to be. So if it's down there, for argument's sake, you can see that your rebates are in line. You can see that point there. You can see where your striking points are for any scribe work you've got to do. You can pick up everything you want all off of your actual rod, and that's what it's all about. So now I've put in that position there. That is my fit line now. So I'm now going to redetermine where the actual door lining goes, or the door frame itself today, the door itself. So by position it on that line there and just striking that one there. Again there, which is on the fit line, not the rebate line, which is there. And again there. Likewise on that one. And again there. And just strike those in. Just lightly the first, just to define where they are. You see the line, I put one on there. Oh, it's there, isn't it? Okay, so that's the dimensions of the door itself. I now need to work in the groove. So again, I know I'm central on that. So in this particular instance, I could just drop that on the end like that. Again, I've got this snipe problem though. So again, I'd just cut a little piece off the end for this. You can feel if there's any snipe on the timber itself. You could rely on that. I'd prefer to just chop a little piece off and use it as that. But I know full well that I've got 8mm and 8 and 8 the way I've dimensioned it up. So I can actually just measure that off. I don't really want to use a tape. I could use this. I'd much prefer to use this. In actual fact, I probably will, just for speed of marking, just for the picture itself. But you've got that positions there; those are already determined. Again, there and there. So you mark that groove there. Again, you can mark the back edge there, and again you can do that on here. This is again sitting on what would be the overall size of the door, not the internal size of the frame. So again, you just position that little groove there, and again on there. And then you draw these in. And then striking those lines through. On here, as you can see, what we've done now, we've established all the pieces that make up the actual piece we're making. So if you look there, that defines the frame. So as that sits on, there's your rebate line all the way around. This little line here is your clearance line for your door. This is the edge of your door. So if you look at this piece here, that's your door section drawn in. So you've got the rebate, the actual groove there, should I say, overall line. This dotted line here represents what would be the actual mortise or tenon, which I'll come on to next. So basically from that point now, you can actually mark in mortises and tenons and mark do all your marking off straight off of the rod now, then go straight to your other machines to continue the project. So with mortises in mind, obviously with this one, this groove determines for me what will be the mortise width. Now, ideally you should work to chisel sizes. It's always easier to work to a chisel size. In this situation, I'm working to what would be the tongue left for the actual panel. So I'm going to keep it at that, which means I may have to alter the chisel and do 2 cuts, which means because that is 8mm and I haven't got an 8mm chisel here, it will mean doing a 6mm cut all the way along and then just moving it over and doing it again. A little bit more work, but invariably it leaves a nice neat job, and it also gives you what would be classed as a haunch line, which is this here. It will leave a haunch into there as well as you cut. So you can actually drop the tenon in, it'll drop down through, and you leave a little haunch at the back as well, so you can actually drop your tenon back in about there and pull it right the way down through. And again, you can do through tenons, stub tenons, anything you want. It's all determined on the rod, entirely up to you. So now, with this situation, that's going to be a central mortise and tenon. On here, because of the rebate, the rule of thumb is normally a third, a third, a third. That's just a ballpark figure. I mean, in this situation, all I'm going to do, I'm going to use this chisel here. It's a 5/8 chisel. And just, again, that's my rebate line there. I don't want to be putting it there because it means I've got to then do shoulder, shoulder sort of stuff like that. All I want to do is just do 2 cuts, one off of that shoulder line there, one on that. It gives me a step shoulder on the tenon, a lot easier to work to. So you just work on what is your defined shoulder line. If you end up with a deep rebate, for argument's sake, you've got a wider door going in, then I would stick it in that point there, which would be the floor of the rebate, and do the same thing, but that rebate would now be over here somewhere. Again, it determines on what meat you've got left. The most meat you've got left in is where you take the actual position. So it may be down there if you've taken all this out, so you may find it's in the floor of the rebate, it may be on top. This situation, it's on top. So likewise with the actual timber, what I'm using is my templates. I'm using the chisel for the same reason. All I'm doing is dropping it on there and just striking that line. I'll just pull that in with the pencil. Just square that in. This goes on to this piece here, which is the actual frame itself, so just dot that in. And likewise out to that point there. So that determines my mortise and tenon line now on here. And I'll do the same on all the other parts. They're all dropped in, so now this rod's ready to go basically. I can actually mark straight off of this and mark up to my component sizes. I just need to determine whether I want to be working, like what sort of size mortise and tenons I want to work. But once I've established that, that's it. And I'll show you, the next phase is to show you the marking out stage off of the rod.